Hello and welcome to our round 7 coverage here at PTQ Manchester. PTQ is a qualifier for a big event over in Dublin later in the year, but as you can see from the standings here, we're going to be covering a couple of guys. We've got Heng against Jack Mitchell-Burns. Chin is on 16 points and Jack is cracking away at 15, so both of them are really looking to win an in at this point. So we have no idea what both players are playing at this point. Hopefully we'll pick things up, but joining me for the commentary anyway is Andrew. Hello there.
Hi guys, how's things going? We are in the biggest PTQ that has been seen in the entire UK, and not by a small margin either.
So Jack gets things going here by the look of it. So we have what looks like to be a Doomed Traveller for Jack, so based on that, it looks like he's playing one of the 3 colour decks here.
Yeah, he's going to be either on junk or red, white, black aristocrats.
Jack's very well known for basically picking a solid deck.
Yeah, I think he's been having a lot of success recently with aristocrats as a whole. It's a incredibly solid deck, and it's been putting up really good performances recently.
And looks like we've seen a red mana source from him there on turn 2, so follow it up with a Blood Artist.
Yeah, he's pretty much confirming exactly what we've got here. Chin, we don't quite know what he's on yet. We can see a Stomping Ground and a Blood Crypt, so that could signify Jund. It could also signify something sort of a bit more spicy. I think Jack's game plan in this one is mainly going to be the aristocrat style plan, which is to just nibble your opponent down, and it does have the big finish in the form of Boros Reckoner, which we're about to see now, it looks like, and obviously Blasphemous Act being the combo that does 13 or more damage to your opponent, generally more when there's a Blood Artist
I believe
in play.
Brian Kibble actually commented a little bit about Blood Artists and sort of the other little small creatures recently, and he said that the deck itself doesn't really have that much in the way of synergy.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I disagree with that. I'd say the deck is basically built on synergy.
It's basically a bunch of small creatures that's sort of quite easy to disrupt from your opponent. It says, like, if you get the Blood Artists off the board, the deck can very often just fall apart.
That's very true. It's the deck is pretty much built around sacrifice effects and Blood Artists to deal a lot of its
I'm not one
damage.
to argue with Brian Kibler, so I'm just going to throw that one out there.
Yeah, I mean, the deck has a lot of inherent synergy in it. That's what the deck's mainly built around, but it is just a collection of really bad cards which happen to work really well together. You know, sort of Doomed Traveller isn't going to be doing any 120 anytime soon, but it doesn't need to. That's not its role in the deck. It's basically just as many sort of resilient creatures that just annoy your opponent as possible. There's also the Junk Aristocrats deck, which Brad Nelson's been doing a lot of work with recently online, which has a instead of having the Boros Reckoner and the Blasphemous Act, it goes for things like Young Wolf and...
So we now know anyway that Chin Heng's deck's full of cards like Mulch, as he appears to be on the Reanimator, a big thing deck.
Yeah, but rather than the standard Junk Reanimator, which is a deck that we're seeing a lot of, this is more of a 4-colour Reanimator build. I believe it's done fairly well in the US PTQs, and the way that the deck kind of plays, it takes the Boros Reckoner Blasphemous Act combo in inverted commas and adds it into a sort of Reanimator, Junk Reanimator style shell, but that also allows it to play Faithless Looting, which means that you can dig even further into your deck. The only thing you have to pay for is a slightly wonky mana base, and you also lose the mana acceleration from.
So the Doom Traveller attacks there and throws itself into the graveyard.
Yep. And Chin's going to use the ability from the Boros Reckoner to shoot the Blood Artist. So we've got the situation that we described earlier where the Blood Artist's off the board. You'll notice Jack just making a motion to his head there, indicating he missed something, and he did. If Jack had sacrificed the... I think if Jack had used the Tragic Slip before his Blood Artist had died, Chin would now be on 13 and therefore within Blasphemous Act range. But Jack did miss it, so Chin is currently out of Blasphemous Act range, but we don't know how relevant that's going to be at the moment because Jack's a long way away from actually casting Blasphemous Act at this point.
But 13's certainly the big number.
Yeah.
In this deck. It's a number where you got to start worrying.
And the one thing that the Reanimator decks do, be it Junk Rights or this 4-colour version, they see a lot of cards. Be it through Mulch, Grizzly Salvage, Faceless Looting, these decks draw a lot of cards.
Grizzly Salvage is by no means an easy card to cast, a lot harder to cast than Impulse, but it's a very powerful card in the current format.
I mean, given how good mana is these days, it's not really that tough to cast anyway, I would say. But yeah, it's we've come a long way since the old days of Impulse and sort of other card filtering abilities.
But they deliberately made those cards in different colours to the cards that really abuse them.
Yeah, although I mean,
like Snapcaster Mage.
I mean, there could potentially be a bug deck out there, but it would more than likely be a little bit. It would be more than a little bit ropey, considering they have tried to keep things just out of colours where there would just be an obvious best deck.
I'm still waiting for one of these games where one of the players is wearing a Rolex or something like that. Something like showing off the old cheap watch on the camera. But though Jack does always show the tattoos.
Yep, indeed.
You never see him with a rolled up shirt or anything.
No. And why would you with artwork like that? Anyway, it's a Thragtusk here from Chin. We're gonna see a few of those, I imagine, today.
This has been a very popular way of showing your graveyard these days. It sort of took off a few years ago when Dredge started appearing everywhere. How you would fan your graveyard out to show everything.
Many legacy players still do fan out their graveyard when it comes to Dredge. However, one of the things that you do have to watch out for with your graveyard in Legacy is that you do have to keep it in order. In Standard, you don't have to keep your graveyard in order because there's no cards which say the top card of your graveyard.
So if you did have problems remembering your graveyard from time to time in Standard, would you recommend to people to just take the cards you know to be important and sort of place them at the top?
I mean, that can be a little bit of a tell to your opponent what you're planning to do.
Your opponent should know.
But your
generally what your game plan is anyway.
Yeah. Looks like Jack's just first struck down the Thragtusk. Is it first striked or first struck? Not sure how we should say that, but... And Cartel Aristocrat from Jack there. Again, another creature that's not so great on its own, but with the effects that are in the deck and just the general synergy of the overall deck, it works incredibly well. In fact, it's also another sort of enabler with Blasphemous Act because it'll survive. And in fact, I believe that's happened on Pro Tour level with Tom Martell, who originally played the original Aristocrats deck. I believe it's just called Act 2 now because it's changed so much throughout time.
It's a bit like how Rook Delver, some people would call Canadian Threshold.
Yeah. Similar idea, you make a Nimble Mongoose and give it Threshold. Chin doing a little bit of playing around with his land here, not too sure what he's planning on. And this is one of the slight problems with the Reanimator decks that we have, is that if you don't see that Unburial Rites, the deck just feels very, very clunky. And the Queen of all Vampires coming down for Chin there, and he's going to attempt to put a counter on her, but Jack's going to fizzle the ability with the Cartel Aristocrat.
There's another phrase we don't hear anymore.
Fizzle, no. Can you tell we're old school yet, commentating on this? He counters the ability due to it having no target. I'm sorry, fizzle just sounds better. Anyone's got an opinion on that, put it in the comments for the video.
So tough.
Having said that though, I'm one of those hopeless people who also thinks that berry should be a key. They should bring back berry as a keyword.
So we're starting to understand why Chin's already drawn one round so far in this tournament. Things are certainly dragging on a little bit here.
I think we're also about to understand why Jack was hitting his head earlier. As Jack does now have the mana for Blasphemous Act due to Chin having some guys in play, but because Chin's on 14 it's not going to be lethal. I think we can see a Blasphemous Act there in Jack's hand, so now he's more than likely just having regrets.
UK players certainly do a very sterling work in trying to punt games. I think we're experts at doing stuff like that.
Jack's on the attack and hope my opponent's bad planet, I think, here. Hope my opponent doesn't realise what my deck does. I mean, from the reaction that Jack had earlier, Chin should know what's coming anyway. And just through knowledge of the format, he should know what's coming anyway. I think he's expecting Tragic Slip there from Jack, but...
You talk a lot about knowledge of the format, and that's actually one of the really interesting things about both today and tomorrow, in that it's a double header. We have the PTQ today and the WMCQ on the Sunday, so it's towards the end of the standard season. We've already had about 5 or 6 PTQs in the UK. So really, you know, if you can't bring yourself to test properly for a double header,
yeah, you don't really have much business winning one if you can't be, you know, if you're not going to.
Especially not when 302 players turn up to play.
Yeah, I mean, probably not expecting 302 to be fair, but you've got to be expecting at least 200.
Well, you say at least 200. The previous largest PTQ in the UK was 198 players.
It's true, but the Manchester PTQs tend to be the largest ones in the UK. Plus, with the fact that double headers have always drawn well as part of a, you know, in the past they've always drawn well on players. I think that it should have been pretty much a given that this was going to be around at least 220. Jack with Obsidat there, nice bit of work off the top of his deck. And now Chin really is in trouble, as I'm not too sure that the Reanimator deck has any way to deal with that Obsidat.
Apart from actually attacking with his own monsters rather quickly.
Yeah, he has to. I think his plan is to just maybe reanimate. I mean, if he can reanimate another Thragtusk, then that'd reanimate or cast another Thragtusk. That'd put him ahead in the race. But the other side of that is that Jack does have cards in his deck like Lingering Souls and Doom Traveller, which provide 2 blockers. So
Chin also has to leave himself with a blocker.
yeah, because obviously Obsidat's a 5/5 with haste when he comes back in. feel like when you're playing this Reanimator deck, we see Chin discarding Lingering Souls there. I feel that when you are playing this Reanimator deck, the initial reaction that people always have is to discard their cards with flashback. And I think there does come a point in a lot of the games where you're just better keeping that card in hand so you can just cast the spell twice.
Certainly once you have at least 6 mana.
And
Some of the flashback cards allow you to play them out faster.
yes.
But certainly in a matchup like this, which can very often just come down to card advantage.
A lot of the time you're just better off casting the spell twice. Yeah. I mean, in this situation, Chin's done fine because he's used his whole, he's used his entire mana pool available. So that's fine, but I think that many players, when they're playing this Reanimator deck, will find that's a problem for them, or they will just overemphasize flashback on cards.
I believe Jack's been placing his Obsidian on top of his library face up when it goes out, so he doesn't forget to put it back.
Yep. So Chin's got to come up with a Thragtusk this turn, I believe. With him doing this much thinking, I don't think he's got it.
So, Chin looks like scoops up the cards there. Jack goes 1-0 ahead.